नमस्कार, मेरा नाम है हर्षवर्धन सिंह और आप देख रहे हैं MSTV। शो है रूबरू और आज मेरे हाथों में एक किताब है। डॉक्टर स्वप्निल राय असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर हैं यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ मिशिगन में, मीडिया स्टडीज़ पढ़ाती हैं। उनकी किताब है नेटवर्क बॉलीवुड। किसी भी भारतीय के लिए बॉलीवुड को समझना बिल्कुल वैसा ही है जैसे अंग्रेजी की कहावत है, हाथ अनदर साइड ऑफ हैंड। हम जीते हैं उसे सिनेमा को और उससे जुड़ी हुई बाकी सारी चीज़ों को, उसके स्टार्स को, उसके गानों को, सबको। मगर कैसे ये पूरी एक इंडस्ट्री, मतलब इस्तेमाल कर रहा हूँ इंडस्ट्री, वक्त के साथ बदली है और बदलने के साथ साथ जो और बदलाव हैं वो इसकी वजह से हुए हैं। ये मेरी अल्प निजी समझ अभी कहती है, उसमें और बढ़ावा करूँगा, थोड़ा उसे बेहतर करने की कोशिश करूंगा और बात करूंगा डॉक्टर राय से उनकी किताब के बारे में, नेटवर्क्ड बॉलीवुड। बहुत बहुत स्वागत डॉक्टर राय आपका।
थैंक यू।
तो डॉक्टर राय, सबसे पहले तो क्या पढ़ाती हैं आप यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ मिशिगन में?
तो मैं मीडिया इंडस्ट्रीज और ग्लोबल कम्युनिकेशन पढ़ाती हूँ। तो डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ क्लासेस पढ़ाती हूँ। उसमें जैसे वुमेन मीडिया इंडस्ट्रीज में हैं, कैसे हैं, क्या स्ट्रक्चर है, उस पर क्लास पढ़ाती हूँ। इंडियन सिनेमा और इंडियन फिल्म इंडस्ट्री पे क्लास पढ़ाती हूँ। मैं एक ग्लोबल मीडिया पे क्लास पढ़ाती हूँ जिसमें हम लोग देखते हैं कि कैसे शुरू से कल्चरल इंपीरियलिज्म का मॉडल है, कैसे हाउ अमेरिकन मीडिया in the beginning, in the 70s, sort of dominated the global landscape, how it happened, why it happened, how is it changing. We look at all different types of media. So basically, essentially, when it comes to global communication, I teach about the industry, how it works, industrial power, those kinds of things across different types of global locations. So Indian media is also one of them, but I also teach other industries and other industries from the global south.
यूएस में जो बच्चे हैं वो इंडियन सिनेमा को पढ़ना चाहते हैं, डू दे स्टडी?
बिल्कुल।
और क्या उसके बाद वो करते हैं,
जैसे आपका जो इंस्टीट्यूट है, so my department is a film, TV and media department. So we try to train critical thinkers and makers. So we have production classes that go along with studies classes that both come together, right? So if we have students, like they learn camera work, they learn whatever, like the 3 camera setup for a sitcom, they want to make a sitcom, they want to go on to be, and we have like very illustrious alum from our department that are in Hollywood, in other industries. But the point is that they learn the making, but they also learn the critical thinking. They also learn the behind the scenes, how industry works, the kinds of questions that maybe I ask in the book, like structurally, how it evolved, how it changed, what is the functioning, what is the role of certain actors. So we inform them on the theoretical side, how this works and how to think critically about it, how to think critically as makers. I also teach them things about content, like we break down shots, we look at the aesthetics, what it means, what kind of affect it creates. So for example, I teach a class on global auteurs where we look at cinema from a lot of different regions. I teach another class where I look at films by women, and to think about, what is the purpose of putting this particular shot in this particular way? Like, how do you use color? How do you use sound? What do you do with the cinematography? So the production side of things, they learn to do the technical stuff. We teach them how to understand sort of the meaning behind what you do with, how do you put it together, right?
अगर मैं अपने दर्शकों के लिए आपके इस जवाब को आसान करूं तो कैसे दिखाना है ये प्रोडक्शन क्लासेस, और क्या दिखाना है कि सोच वो आप लोग देते हैं?
सोच आए आपका अगर एक पर्टिकुलर मैसेज है, तो अगर आप इस सीन को इस तरह शूट करोगे तो इसका क्या मतलब है, और आप इसको ये करोगे तो इसका क्या मतलब है, ये अंतर जो है। और बॉलीवुड सिनेमा को कभी किसी ने इस तरह से सीरियसली सोचा ही नहीं। मेरे स्टूडेंट्स मेरी क्लास से निकल के आके कई बार यही कहते हैं कि हमने ये सिनेमा इतने दिन कंज्यूम किया, बट हमने इसके बारे में ये सोचा ही नहीं कि बट तो कई बार मैं इंग्लिश मूवीज, हॉलीवुड मूवीज की ग्रामर और बॉलीवुड मूवीज की ग्रामर, हाउ इज इट डिफरेंट? I situate it in a specific way, and my students like are very surprised. And yes, American students want to learn about this because media is getting global. You see a lot of Bollywoodized, Bollywood type of things being incorporated in Hollywood sequences, and it's all coming from, you know, the kind of learning that's happening in American universities.
थोड़ा सा stereotypical image भी कम हो रहा है because अभी I started watching The Big Bang Theory once again. तो
Yeah.
पुत्रपल्ली का जो representation है वो अब वैसा नहीं होगा जैसे तब था.
Okay, so I have to tell you, the showrunner of The Big Bang Theory is an alum of my department, and he's come and taught in my TV history class.
That's great. Send my love to him if it is a him.
It is a him.
That's great. Dr. Rai, now come down to the book, Network Bollywood, and what I believe the most important part is that how star power globalized Hindi cinema. मेरी दरखास्त है आपसे कि इसको थोड़ा आसान तरीके से, क्योंकि जैसा भी आप ही ने खुद बोला कि आपके स्टूडेंट्स भी बोलते हैं कि आप इतने लंबे समय से देख रहे थे, वी आर कंज्यूमिंग इट, बट जस्ट फ्रॉम द एंटरटेनमेंट एंगल, नो केवल एंटरटेनिंग था वो हमारे लिए, मगर उसके जो बहुत सारे और एस्पेक्ट हैं, इकोनॉमिकल एस्पेक्ट है, ग्लोबलाइजेशन सब हो रहा है, उसका सोशल एक एस्पेक्ट है, सारा कुछ वो जो है मैं थोड़ा सा चाहता हूँ कि आप जो किताब बात करती है वो हमारे दर्शकों के लिए बताएं।
तो बहुत सिंपली आप देखिए, जब भी हम बॉलीवुड की बात करते हैं या स्टार्स की बात करते हैं, हमेशा हम लोग उनके लार्जर देन लाइफ स्क्रीन पर्सोनास के बारे में सोचते हैं कि अरे ये फलां, ये स्टार, ये वो, बट कभी हम ये नहीं सोचते कि पहले तो स्टार जो है ऑन स्क्रीन पर्सोना के बियॉन्ड भी कुछ है इंडस्ट्रियल स्ट्रक्चर में। तो स्टार एज बिजनेसमैन ये कोई सोचता ही नहीं है, जबकि मेरी किताब जो कहानी बता रही है कि हिस्टोरिकली stars as businessmen have been like the key drivers and key architects of Hindi cinema's globalization, taking this cinema to markets where Hindi cinema didn't exist before. तो जहाँ पे कोई presence नहीं था, मतलब एक बहुत logical चीज है अगर आप ये बोलो कि somebody like me living in the US will watch Hindi films. This is a very logical connection. I am Indian, I have Indian roots, I will watch Indian cinema. But why would a white person in Germany watch Indian cinema? Why were the Russians watching Indian cinema? Why were the Egyptians watching Indian cinema? I mean, that there's a lot of scholarship on global Bollywood, you know, that comes after 2000s, like after Bollywood's recognition as an industry, right? But none of it, and the one that comes often looks at the diaspora market and how that was key to developing Bollywood in a certain way, but कोई ये नहीं देख रहा और सोच रहा मेरी बुक जो कहानी बताती है, मतलब मैं ये नहीं बोल रही कि कोई देख नहीं रहा, सोच नहीं रहा, मैं जो इंटरेस्टिंग कहानी
जो आपने देखा
जो मैंने देखा वो ये था कि ये ग्लोबलाइजेशन हैपेंड along a continuum, that it was the Indian Hindi film industry or Indian film industry was global from the very outset because it had a global value chain, और उसमें stars जो हैं businessmen की तरह, seldom business women की तरह, were key drivers to taking cinema to a market जहाँ पे पहले उसका कोई market ही नहीं था, and they opened it up. And then there were others in the industry that followed suit or wanted to, like whether they did it successfully or not is a different question, but how these people were able to open those markets. And another important question that I talk about in the book कि क्यों कुछ तरह के stars ही थे जो ऐसा कर पाए, हर कोई नहीं कर पाया, कोशिश बहुत लोगों ने की, तो उस ऐसे stars थे जो इंडस्ट्री में सेंट्रल थे, जो जिनके पॉलिटिकल कनेक्शंस थे, जिनके इकोनॉमिक कनेक्शंस थे, जो अपने उन कनेक्शंस को एक सर्टेन वे में लेवरेज कर पाए।
लेगेसी भी थी क्या? लेगेसी
भी थी, हाँ, वो इंडस्ट्री कनेक्शंस का यही मतलब है ना? तो जैसे राज कपूर की स्टोरी जो मैं इस बुक में,
डॉक्टर आई एम सॉरी टू इंटरप्ट, बट लेगेसी होना और इंडस्ट्री कनेक्शन होना ये थोड़ा सा अलग हो जाता है। अगर किसी का लेगेसी है, दोज हु कम फ्रॉम द फैमिली ऑफ आर्टिस्ट, मतलब एज इन दोज हु नॉट इनटू सिनेमा, जो उस इंडस्ट्री का पार्ट नहीं है, एंड बीइंग फ्रॉम द इंडस्ट्री, जो कि आर्टिस्ट नहीं है, जस्ट फ्रॉम द इंडस्ट्री, प्रोडक्शन हाउस है, फादर का प्रोडक्शन हाउस था, फादर के स्टूडियोज थे, अदर पर्सन वांट्स टू बी अ पार्ट ऑफ द, तो ये दो अलग एस्पेक्ट है।
तो आप अपना समझाइए फिर से, तो जो स्टूडियो था ये इसको आप लेगेसी बोल रहे हो?
मैं बोल रहा हूँ लेगेसी एज इन कि मैं फर्स्ट कीजिए जैसे पर्सन हु इज अ सितार प्लेयर, नो सच कनेक्शन टू द इंडस्ट्री, जस्ट एन आर्टिस्ट। Another this section, why I'm asking this question, मैं इस पे भी आऊंगा। Another portion of the whole question is कि एक व्यक्ति है जिसके फादर का शायद या फिर किसी का रिलेटिव का किसी का एक प्रोडक्शन हाउस था, not that artistic understanding of it.
But so आप ये बोल रहे, okay, so your question is sort of a little bit random. So let me tell you what I'm saying, what I mean by industry connections. It means both things, because what the kinds of stars that I'm talking about are part of the industry through kinship ties and networks, but are central to the industry in a certain phase. But then also, it doesn't always need to be like a legacy connection. Like Bachchan, for example, came as an outsider but became so central to the industry. But then he had like political clout and political backing. Like arguably, Indira Gandhi got him entry into the film industry. तो जब मैं जैसे theoretical way में सोचिए, तो अगर मैं बोल रही हूँ इंडस्ट्री कनेक्शन है, पॉलिटिकल कनेक्शन है, इकोनॉमिक कनेक्शन है, हर किसी का इक्वल मेजर में नहीं होता है। किसी के पास एक ज्यादा होगा तो दूसरा कम होगा, बट तीनों है, और साथ में वो लोग बड़े स्टार्स हैं, है ना, दैट दे हैव दैट काइंड ऑफ, जो स्टारडम की आप बात कर रहे थे, अफेक्टिव persona उनका इतना ह्यूज है, all of that comes together to give them like a certain kind of power that helps them open up a new market. And I have different case studies, so if you want to if you want me to get into it, I can explain you more with a case. So I can talk to you about Raj
the only
Kapoor.
reason I asked this because like the way you just mentioned about Amitabh Bachchan, that okay, he didn't have that industry thing, but that's again a questionable, debatable thing. Why? Because Harivansh Rai Bachchan was an insider of the industry, because all the people those
वो तो अब देखिए, अब so I'm giving you a very zoomed out view, है ना? So you have to understand that.
I understood that.
So I'm giving you a very zoomed out view of like how power works.
Right.
है ना?
Exactly.
Which is what I'm trying to theorize. So it can be, I mean, ये छोटी मोटी चीजें होंगी कि आप बोलेंगे कि अच्छा भाई नरगिस की मम्मी म्यूजिक प्रोड्यूसर थी, है ना, और राज कपूर के पिताजी के पास he came like from a very kind of theater background, and so his legacy, and Amitabh Bachchan like came from the outside but had politics. Would small nuances, differences will exist, but essentially the big picture view is all of them have like these few things, these connections and these things in different measure. मतलब it's not exactly the same. That's why क्योंकि उनका stardom और persona भी different है ना, but that's why it comes together in a certain way for each star. But the point is कि वो power जो है वो ऐसे work करते हैं, ये सारे elements थोड़े थोड़े होने चाहिए,
बिल्कुल,
है ना, ये point है।
मेरा सवाल मैं जिस पे जाना चाह रहा था पूछ के, वो ये कि creating a business around it and creating a whole empire एक खड़ा करने के लिए, when it comes about to the artistic legacy, sometimes as a question, is it difficult to do that if you have a industrial this backing up? अगर किसी का for example as a layman studios है और production में वो है, तो उनके लिए empire खड़ा करना, was it easy or is it easy as compared to the person coming from the legacy of an artist and like proper into art? That is my question.
तो मेरी बुक की कहानी जो है, कितना मुश्किल है कितना नहीं है इंडिविजुअल लेवल पे ये नहीं है। मेरे बुक की कहानी ये है कि कैसे कुछ लोग जिनके पास इन सब तरह का पावर था, उन्होंने अपनी कंपनी खोली और उनके पास ग्लोबल एम्बिशंस थे, ठीक है ना, और चूंकि वो इन चीजों से इस तरह से कनेक्टेड थे, उन्होंने अपने ग्लोबल एम्बिशंस को पूरा कर पाया और साथ में इंडस्ट्री के लिए भी एक रास्ता खोला, है ना। तो अभी मैं आपको बताती हूँ एक एग्जांपल कैसे, तो एक केस की जरूरत है। अब 50s में फॉर एग्जांपल मेरी बुक बात करती है राज कपूर की और देवानंद की। 50s में क्या हो रहा था, वर्ल्ड इवेंट कोल्ड वॉर हो रहा था, है ना। अब यूएस और सोवियट्स दोनों चाह रहे थे इन्फ्लुएंस करना इंडिया को, ठीक है। नेहरू was more inclined towards the Soviets, okay, and in that scenario you get these two stars, both had their own production companies, were making movies. And how did that their situation like help them create circuits for circulation of that cinema in each context? So Raj Kapoor, for example, so I'll give you how it happened for him. So because the Soviets wanted to have a presence in India, like do that kind of cultural collaboration, that was part of the Cold War thing, because they wanted that kind of ideological influence. So Mosfilm came and set up an office in India, and then they were looking for films जो वो जाके मॉस्को में दिखाएं, है ना। तो उन्होंने खोजा, उन्हें आवारा मिली, उन्हें राही मिली। अच्छा, इंडियन स्टेट से उन्होंने बात की, मतलब गवर्नमेंट से बात की कि भाई आपकी कौन सी फिल्म हम ले सकते हैं, दे सकते हैं। द इंडियन स्टेट consistently, that's throughout history, it's changed a little bit in contemporary times with Modi, but they always, like, cinema was never front and center when thinking about Indian culture or Indian legacy or Indian histories or any kind of cultural exchange. So when they were asking for movies, they said, well, we don't know, type of thing. Mosfilm on their own, because there was an industry here, found these two films. They screened it in the Soviet Union, and apparently like both movies did well, especially Avara. And then because Nehru was very good friends with Prithvi Raj Kapoor, and Prithvi Raj Kapoor was a member of parliament at the time, they got together in a party where Nehru mentioned to Kapoor that, oh, your son's film, I heard from Stalin or whoever that your son's film did well. And so that is how then Raj Kapoor became part of the delegation that went with Nehru to meet with Nikita Khrushchev. Also, like, Devanand was part of it because Rahi also had done well. But you see how like Kapoor's Avara created a whole chain of circulation, a deeper circulation there. Devanand went to the other side, the US, like he did several collaborations, but because the broader like geopolitical structure was different when it came to the Soviet Union versus the US, I mean, he did what he did, it was mostly him and nothing more happened there. So my point, oftentimes when I talk about this power, like power never exists in a vacuum, ठीक है ना? पावर अपने आप से एग्जिस्ट नहीं करता, इट एग्जिस्ट इन रिलेशन टू अ स्ट्रक्चर। तो कैसे सोसाइटी चेंज हो रही है, कैसे पॉलिटिक्स चेंज हो रही है, ऑल ऑफ दैट इन्फ्लुएंसेस हाउ दे wield दैट पावर, है ना। और उसका जो आपने अच्छा सवाल पूछा कि क्या है, मतलब व्हाट इज द proportion, those proportions are different, it varies by star, it varies by a lot of factors, it's a lot of like a relational dynamic.
There's another thing that your book talks about, is about how Aishwarya Rai, Priyanka Chopra, about these big female stars, just for the people out there, those who knew them off the camera, like you were talking about Nargis ji. अगर हम अभी की बात करते हैं तो for a person as a layman उनके लिए बहुत बड़े नाम. I want to keep Priyanka Chopra aside from this because she's in US or doing some different stuff. अभी जो बाकी एक्टर्स, फीमेल एक्टर्स हमारे पास इंडिया में, अगर हम उनका पुट देखें to make it globalize the whole cinema or to create the business around it, from the whole case studies that you had earlier, how do you see them right now?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So my book is doing two things. One is it's tracing this organizational history, है ना। तो उसमें कैसे स्मॉल फैमिली लेड फिल्म क्लस्टर्स से जो that were often spearheaded by stars, तो उसका क्या मतलब है, जैसे शुरू में 50s में जब स्टार लेड प्रोडक्शंस कंपनीज बनी, तो ये फैमिली लेड फिल्म क्लस्टर्स से मेरा क्या मतलब है, तो जैसे एक पिक्चर आप लीजिए आवारा, आवारा राज कपूर ने अपनी प्रोडक्शन कंपनी से बनाई, है ना। ही वॉज द डायरेक्टर, ही वॉज द प्रोड्यूसर, उनकी गर्लफ्रेंड लीड एक्टर थी, उनके पिताजी उनके ऑन स्क्रीन पिताजी थे, उनके छोटे भाई played his younger self in the movie. His friend wrote the screenplay. He had a DP who worked with him like on all of his movies, like consistent. That friend was the DP on the movie. So जो ये family led film clusters का business model है, इसमें स्टार इज एट द हेल्म, बट उनके अराउंड उनके फ्रेंड्स एंड फैमिली का नेटवर्क है जो प्रोडक्शन बनाते हैं, एंड दैट्स हाउ इट वाज फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम टिल 90s हुआ, लिबरलाइजेशन हुआ और बच्चन के साथ वो एक कंसेप्चुलाइजेशन हुआ कि भाई डिज्नी लाइक कॉर्पोरेशन भी बन सकती है, और एबीसीएल बनी, which was its own kind of thing, which failed, but there were other companies that followed suit in a similar model. Now, when the good question that you've asked about the contemporary moment, which is how do I see the agency of stars? So as I was mentioning to you before, like a lot about the industrial structure has changed and is in flux again with the coming of OTT platforms. And so OTT platforms such as Netflix, such as Amazon, are coming in and saying कि भाई हमारा तो diversity initiative है, हमारा creative equity initiative hai, that we want to give representation to the underrepresented, that we want women to have certain kind of presence, like beyond on-screen roles, production presence. So you have an Alia Bhatt set up a production company and make a movie like Darlings. You have a Anushka Sharma set up a production company and sign a deal with Amazon, I think, to make like women-oriented films. So there is kind of these moments of power now being created. But when in the book, जो मैं अंतर की बात कर रही हूँ ऐश्वर्या राय और प्रियंका चोपड़ा की, तो जैसे मैंने बोला ये पावर वैक्यूम में तो एग्जिस्ट करता नहीं है, स्ट्रक्चर के रिलेशन में एग्जिस्ट करता है. तो जब ऐश्वर्या राय सीन पे आई तो इंडस्ट्री को कैसे ग्लोबलाइज होना था ये पता नहीं था, है ना, बट मनी ट्रिकल इन कर रहा था, पैसे आ रहे थे क्योंकि इकोनॉमिक लिबरलाइजेशन हो चुका था, दोज वर द अर्ली डेज. और मेरी बुक में एक पार्ट है कैसे मिस इंडिया और इस कॉन्टेस्ट को शुरू में कैसे देखा जाता था, 50s में क्या वैल्यू थी मिस इंडिया की, एंड हाउ 90s में वो सडनली चेंज हो गई, बहुत बदल गई. और 90s में मतलब they started to be seen as brand ambassadors, like they were part of the nation branding because India as a nation wanted to be seen as global. चीजें यहाँ पे बदल रही थी, है ना. बट ऐश्वर्या राय एंड शी बिकेम लाइक अ क्रूशियल नोड, बिकॉज आप देखिए कैन फिल्म फेस्टिवल आज की डेट में कितना कॉमन है ना. ऐश्वर्या राय वाज द फर्स्ट वन टू बी पिक्ड एज अ जज, है ना. और मेरी बुक जो कहानी बताती है, क्योंकि व्हाई वाज शी एबल टू डू इट, जो पावर की मैं बात कर रही हूँ, एक तो डायरेक्ट पावर होता है और एक स्टारडम का अफेक्टिव पावर होता है. और वो जैसे पियर बोर्डू एक स्कॉलर हैं, वो कैपिटल की बात करते हैं, कैसे डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ मनी के अलावा और कितने टाइप ऑफ कैपिटल होते हैं. तो सोशल कैपिटल एक चीज है, कल्चरल कैपिटल एक चीज है, एस्थेटिक कैपिटल. तो ऐश्वर्या राय की ब्यूटी इतनी सुपरलेटिव थी, एंड देन शी वेंट एंड वन दैट कॉन्टेस्ट. सो शी क्रिएटेड अ स्पेस, for that kind of visibility for India, like on and off herself. That is what I'm talking about, like with these stars. But ऐश्वर्या राय ने जो किया, उनके पास डायरेक्ट इंडस्ट्रियल, उनका पावर ज्यादा अफेक्टिव ही था कि उन्होंने सिमिलर चीजें, बट वो इमोशन और अफेक्ट और स्टारडम वाली चीजें से उन्होंने डायरेक्ट चीजें अचीव की, ठीक है ना. तो नेशन ब्रांडिंग में उन्होंने हेल्प की, बट with Aishwarya Rai, like the industry structure didn't exist to support her. So she still functioned like she got representation with this woman called Simone Sheffield, who was based in London, who represented her. But at that time, like the industry was still like in changing, evolving. Now, when it comes to Chopra and the rest of the stars that follow Chopra, in my book, I call Chopra the star of network Bollywood, because when she comes on the scene, like already Creative Artists Agency, which is a Hollywood talent agency, had collaborated with Kwan, had a market, in India. Structurally the industry had changed in a way that there were multiple organizations and nodes ready to support her move. So Priyanka Chopra, for example, was launched in the US market in stages. Like first she did a music video, then she did a campaign for guests, then she goes on and does a TV show, and then she moves on to film. So the fact that she could become this kind of crossover star was supported actually by an organization called Desi Hits that was looking for a crossover star. right? And the woman that owned the organization later on became Chopra's manager, Anjula Churiabat. So to think about when she comes on the scene, there's already this structure, and once that structure has been consolidated, solidified, you have a spate of stars. You have anybody like from Richa Chadda to her husband to whoever, XYZ stars. My book has a whole list. I can read it to you. Ali Fazal, all of them can do crossovers, right? There's multiple stars. You just think, because that Deepika Padukone, everybody, like Deepika Padukone is still like a different league of star, but it doesn't have to be that kind of stardom anymore. It's easy because the structure exists for them to kind of make that crossover. Yeah.
Just because we have taken so many names, काफी सारे नाम अभी हम लोगों ने लिए बताया, दो नाम अगर हम बॉलीवुड की बात करें तो सबसे शीर्ष पर आते हैं शाहरुख खान और अमिताभ बच्चन. इन दोनों में से किसी एक को सेंटर में रख के अगर आप इस चीज को थोड़ा सा एक्सप्लेन और कर पाए कि हाउ दे स्टार्टेड और ग्लोबली, क्योंकि शाहरुख खान इज कंसीडर्ड टू बी एज द वन ऑफ द मोस्ट नोन इंडियन एक्टर अभी और शायद कभी के भी. तो उनको सेंटर में रख के अगर आप ग्लोबलाइजेशन वाला थोड़ा सा और
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. So Shahrukh Khan is again a major case study in my book, and उसमें केस है जर्मनी का. ठीक है, जर्मनी में कोई पहले नहीं देखता था इंडियन सिनेमा, है ना. अब शाहरुख खान के पास अपनी कंपनी थी. Through that, he was able to release one of his films, Red Chillies, or through that he could release his movies, one of his movies on this German channel called RTL2. और उसमें मतलब हमारी movies तो long होती हैं, they had edited it like to fit the TV format. What that initiated was there's this group of German women who I got to interview that really liked Shah Rukh Khan, and then there's affect. They were so affectively moved that they became fans of Shah Rukh Khan. So वो internet के early days थे. So you know how there used to be these online web communities. The one release and this affect and fandom for Shah Rukh Khan had them create a German-speaking like fan community on the web for Shah Rukh Khan that eventually like grew in a way that led these people, some people, this group of women, to think about putting together a magazine, and they created a magazine dedicated to Shah Rukh Khan. Obviously, you cannot run a magazine on just one star, and eventually you see that grew to a Bollywood magazine. That company now, does more things like you. I mean, they also had a podcast for which, since I spoke to them, they wanted to interview me for my podcast, which I will do at some point. But yes, so it grew into like a full service Bollywood agency. So you see how direct power, his company being able to do something, comes together with the affective power through this kind of fanish network that leads to the company, the Bollywood getting entry into a market where there was no space for Bollywood, and now you have every other star going to Berlinale, and you have like a fandom for Ranveer Kapoor and Alia Bhatt. But you see how, this is my story, how certain types of stars, certain stars can go and open up markets that did not exist before. For Bachchan, for example, I have a very interesting anecdote. I think you'll enjoy it. So the interesting thing my book does, जैसे बॉलीवुड ऐसी चीज है ना, आप किसी को भी बॉलीवुड बोलोगे, हर किसी ने बॉलीवुड मूवी देखी है, everybody is an expert on Bollywood. It's really hard. Then मैं बोलूँ कि मैंने बॉलीवुड पर किताब लिखी है तो लोग मेरे को आके समझा देते हैं कि है क्या बॉलीवुड और क्या है. तो let me tell you कि what does an academic endeavor get you, right? Why did I study it for so long and why it's worth studying in this way is because anecdotally हर कोई, मतलब if you meet somebody who's traveled somewhere and they've been to Egypt, they say, oh, my cabbie called me Bachchan. Like, so it's all anecdotal. Right. Nobody really knows what the Egyptians were thinking, what was the distribution like, what were the numbers like. because I happened to be at a great university with good resources, I was able to do the research, archival work on the other side, to actually figure out what were the Egyptians thinking, to actually get these letters that people sent to the Soviets, and how they treated Nargis and how they treated Kapoor, and how these films were screened and so on. So when it came to Bachchan, I found that again history and politics becomes important. So India was part of the non-aligned movement, right? So Nehru, Nasser, and Tito were together, that. And then with Nasser, then Indian movies were being sent to Egypt because they wanted that kind of cultural collaboration. But after Nasser is gone from the scene, you have the next president, Anwar Sadat, who thinks that, these Indian movies are becoming too popular in Egypt and it's hurting our domestic industry, so we should stop them. And he stops Indian movies from being screened. However, Bachchan's movies still remain getting screened in Egypt for a while because Sadat's wife was a fan, right? So then thinking about these kind of elite fan networks and what it helped them accomplish. Similarly, there's a story or like art of things I found about Raj Kapoor, for example. Raj Kapoor films were global in the Soviet Union. That was the state distribution model.
The whole reason how it happened.
We talked about that. But his films he were also exported to Iran, for example. And how did that come about? It's because the Hindujas liked Kapoor, and one time he screened Sangam for them. And Hindujas were our industrialists, so they did have business interests. So along with their other stuff, they also took Sangam to Iran, and Iran was screened there. And that's how there's this whole, so thinking about why certain stars and how certain stars can kind of initiate things and create new pathways that open up markets. It's not always that market completely opens up for everybody, but like you already seen the example of Shah Rukh Khan in Germany, that it has full well opened up a whole scene for Bollywood and for directors to screen their films. Berlinal and Khan have become kind of common terms in Bollywood vocabulary.
Your book talks about this bars of change, the last of it, that how streaming platforms and state industry alliance are reconfiguring state power in network Bollywood. I need to understand this if you can.
Yeah. So my book, like I said, talks about structural change.
Right.
So how in the beginning phase it's like this family-led film clusters, how it changes to a different type of network in the 70s, 80s with mafia criminal economy networks getting added to it, and then how that changes with liberalization, right? So the kind of corporatization and all of that happens, and then how it changes again, and the certain structures getting broken up, but also the network expanding with streaming platforms, both global and local, coming up on the scene, and how that's changing the dynamic of the industry. So with respect to that, I talk about how two types, these streaming platforms are interacting with Bollywood in two ways. One is that it's solidifying the pre-existing power of stars that were already there. But the new crop of stars that are entering the market, it's harder for them because now structurally the network is different. Harder for them not to enter the market or be global, but to be businessmen in the same way. So there's sort of an impossibility now that the way that the structure has changed for someone to own a Red Chillies in the same way that a Shah Rukh Khan did, because they came at it, or Amir Khan Productions does. So they came at a different time. They're already like huge established business nodes in the industry. So when a Reed Hastings and Ted Sarandos comes to India, they are the first people. I don't know if you remember, there was a tweet when they both came, and Amir and Shah Rukh were the two people that they met with, and they posted out a tweet saying, "Oh, last night got pretty fantastic," and they made deals to acquire the library of their films because they knew already that there was sort of a ready market. and all kinds of films, so even like bad films like Chahat from the 90s are on Netflix. So they acquired the entire library. So my point then becomes that how this rung of stars have inordinate amount of power. There's another rung that is the new entrants, which will have a different power, which would be sort of a lesser power, because structurally the industry has gone from like a star being managed by one manager who takes everything, all directions from the star, and star being very much cognizant of their career in specific ways, to being a model where you have like a casting company, a casting agency, talent agency. You have Hollywood studios, you have Bollywood studios, you have other telecom companies vying to get a piece of the pie. You have lots of PR agencies. You have like, so structurally it's becoming more of a agglomerated structure, I call it in the book, where there are multiple nodes. It's scalar, it's very complex now, right? And within that, there is also the Indian state, which now at least understands the power of media and Bollywood, right? Which then wants to leverage it towards certain ends, because up until all this time, the state never really cared for like cinema or mainstream films. That's one of the reasons why the recognition as an industry came so late. And even while it existed as an industry, there's no like active desire to leverage its soft power or even understand it as soft power. So with the coming of streaming, so there's these two parts. The third part, like I told you, with the women, that certain streaming platforms are coming with initiatives that are doing things, helping some people access power, right? Because it's a moment of flux. But then again, my book tells the story of how that power again is driven by the broader Bollywood forces and is often informed by kinship ties. So you have like the anarchies be created by like entirely these big stars and their progeny, right? And then you have by directors already established within the Bollywood frame as top directors. So certain hierarchies are shifting, but others are being reinforced.
Dr. Rai, thank you for this answer. But my last question, and it is, I don't know whether somewhere down the line related with the book as well, but it is a bit different. Hypothetically thinking that what if all the opportunities in each and every pedestal or platform that was being given to the male stars at that point was being given to the females, what do you think the image would have? अभी आगे क्या हो चुका होता, बॉलीवुड कैसे बदल जा सकता था? Just because you are the best person to answer that, कि आज भी हम जिस ग्लोबलाइजेशन की बात कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि you took the name of Shahrukh Khan, you talked about Germany, you took the name of Amitabh Bachchan, talked about Egypt, Raj Kapoor, and this whole Soviet Union, Russia, right? Like that, Devanand, America, for that matter. If females were given that whole what should I say, each and every other thing that was required to set up whole business aspect of it, है ना? तो आज का बॉलीवुड बदल सकता था, और अगर अभी जो बॉलीवुड है उसके अंदर do we need some changes to give the exact, because you had a paper of yours from Bombay Talkies to Khote Productions, no? From that, it's coming from there, the female part of the Bollywood, of the industry, and their place, if it will be changed, what it will be, a paradigm shift in the Bollywood?
But I wouldn't want to speculate, one, because I'm a research person, but I will tell you what I think. So from the paper that you're referencing, what I talk about is kaise women, even if they are capable, even if, they have kind of similar types of things to offer, they are not taken seriously in the same way, right? So there is kind of structural barriers, there's discursive barriers. In my book, I talk about like women like Juhi Chawla, for example, who were equally part of that production, how they were being framed by the journalists as being this like frivolous person laughing, because essentially they were there to discuss her production venture, but it was turned into something else. So I think that the key thing is to question these very masculinist structures in all aspects. It's not it's not just what needs to change is our thinking beyond of who women are and what they can accomplish, right? Because India in general is very patriarchal and masculinist, which all societies are. Honestly, I'm not saying that the US is super different, but what I'm saying is that to be cognizant of these structures, as you interact with a woman in any industry. And of course, I mean, I think that things would have been different. The story that I tell in the book is for a woman to have the kind of standalone power that Shah Rukh Khan or Amitabh Bachchan could leverage. She had to be super, super elite. The paper that you reference looks at 3 stars. It looks at Devika Rani, it looks at Durga Khote, it looks at Nargis. And you remember before I told you, like, all of these different parts, political networks, they need to come together. These women had some parts of each of these. So Nargis, for example, like her mother was a one of the first like music producers in Bollywood, but she came with a checkered past. Nargis didn't have the kind of religion, like ambiguous, like religious affiliation, and did not have the either religion or caste identity, but she was very central to the industrial network, right? And she had a lot of aesthetic capital. She was superlatively beautiful and she did good roles, so she had the stardom. Durga Khote, on the other hand, came from a it was a very well established family, a Brahmin family. Her dad was a solicitor, but then the dad lost his fortune, and that's why, and not only his dad but his the family she married into, both were good families, but they lost their fortune. And so she writes all of this in her autobiography, how she had to then struggle, right? So she had some sort of centrality, but not immediate in that way. And then she was a star who acted in like character roles and so on, so she didn't have the kind of stardom that Nargis had. Both of these women like tried but couldn't do it because they were lacking in something or the other. The only person that could really do it was Devika Rani, who's just about as elite as they come. वो बिल्कुल मतलब creme de la creme of Indian society, absolutely beautiful, great grannies of Rabindranath Tagore, both sides of her family, educated in UK, like had perfect English to the extent that in the archives I found like a praise for her that was like talking about Devika Rani's clipped diction, that she could put any royal to shame with the way that she spoke English. So you see how it has to be so excessive for a woman to access that same power which the male stars can access, which is also not easy, but yeah, it's
we're talking comparison.
Comparatively it's easier. Yeah.
I think that brings us to the end of this whole interview. I can thank you for a lot many things, but the only thing that I want to thank you right here, right now, is for telling people out there that if you believe that you know Bollywood, you still need to watch it other than from the perspective of entertainment, because it's way more than that. The moment we'll start thinking of Bollywood from that perspective, we'll be able to understand all the other aspects, and it can be a totally different scene, because the social proposition and the social aspect of it will have an impact on the society, which can bring a better change. That's what I believe. Thank you so much, Dr. Rai, for coming down to our studios and talking to us. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.